Okay, now we can start. As I said, today we will continue with chapter 9. This is about factors that influence exchange rates. First, let's briefly have a look at the learning objectives of this chapter. In the beginning, to describe the International Monetary Fund, shortly IMF. I think you have heard this name of this organization before, International Monetary Fund, and its role in the determination of exchange rates. The main role of IMF, as you know, this is about creating stability in financial system in the countries, in the member countries. And by the way, Azerbaijan also is one of the member of IMF from 1992. And then Bretton Woods Agreement. This is one of the most important agreements in the history in the year right after the World War II, including all of the economical organizations. Almost all of them have been created after the World War II, based on the Bretton Woods Agreement in the United States. We will talk about it. Then we should discuss the major exchange rate arrangements that countries use. And after this, to explain the European monetary system, our previous lesson that was about economic integration, we a little talk about it, right? European monetary system, the countries included in the European Union, and some other agreements, etc. How the euro became the currency of the Eurozone, and also we a little talked about it. In the beginning, let's just start with a definition. Let's just define what's the role of central bank. Of course, the central bank, this is a government-established monopoly institution. It regulates and manages monetary policy of the country, of the government. And it says that this is an institution given privileged control over the production and distribution of money and credit. And this central bank responsible for the formulation of monetary policy. So about monetary policy, we talked about it. If you remember from our previous lectures, we said that monetary policy involves management of money supply and interest rate, and also this central bank try to achieve macroeconomic objective like inflation, consumption, economic growth, and liquidity. I have added the link here. If you want to get more information about the role of central bank, you can click on the link and you can find it in the slide. And after this, related to monetary policy, if we just briefly define monetary policy, actually, you have learned this, and it consists of the actions of a central bank, currency board. Okay, currency board or other regulatory committee in different countries, it can has different names. Generally, in our country, this is called as central bank. We do not have additional currency board. All of their regulations related to monetary policy are done by the central bank in our country, but in different countries, they can have different this type of boards, for example, currency board. And so the monetary policy consists of the actions of a central bank or other regulatory committee that determine the size and rate of growth of the money supply. And it directly affects money supply, directly affects inflation level in the country. And also, it also affects unemployment level in the country, and then which in turn affects interest rates. So they are related to each other. For example, related to interest rates, what we can say, interest rate, this is regulated by central bank. For example, in our country, we have a central bank and about 50 commercial banks, right? Approximately 50. Central bank regulates exchange rate. This is also called as discount rate. In Azerbaijani, we say, how do we call it? Discount rate. This is like uçot derecesi, right? Discount rate. So based on that discount rate, central bank gives loans to the commercial banks, for example, with let's say 7% of interest rate, and those commercial banks give loan credit to the to individuals for clients, their clients. So the system is working like this. So after this, reserve currency. We also have talked about the reserve currency, and if you remember, I said mostly reserve currency is held in dollars, but there can be some alternatives. But dollars are accepted as reserve currency in the world. And a reserve currency is currency held by central banks and other major financial institutions as a means to pay off international debt obligations. Every country has some international debts. They are paying by using that reserve currency, dollars, and or to influence their domestic, and also it influences their domestic exchange rate. Holding currency reserves minimizes exchange rate risk. Why? So by having some reserve currency in dollars, if they have, the country, government has enough reserve currency, and when it is needed because of some of their obligations, actually they will not need to exchange their domestic currency to, for example, dollars or some other international currencies, foreign currencies. That's why it minimizes exchange rate risk. Having enough reserve currency in country minimizes exchange rate risk, as the purchasing nation will not have to exchange their currency for the current reserve currency in order to make a purchase. In this case, I said that current reserve currency maybe this is dollar. It can be euro as well, but mostly it will be dollars. In order to make purchase. For example, so if we say that by using reserve currency, countries, governments can make some purchase, and because of their obligations, what type of products they will purchase? For example, oil, gas, right? These are the strategic, let's say, goods, products for country, and mostly the countries are using reserve currency to buy these type of resources, oil, gas, etc. After this, another learning objective, to describe the International Monetary Fund and its role in the determination of exchange rate. I want to make sure that you understand me. That's why just let me ask a simple question. Have you ever heard the name of this organization, IMF? And do you have information about IMF? What are the roles of IMF in your opinion? International Monetary Fund. What type of organization is this? Is Azerbaijan a member of IMF? And do you know the year of membership of our country to IMF? Farid, are you listening?
Yes, it's
Yes, I think you have information about it, about the organization IMF.
üzr istəyirəm. Bu Международный валютный fondudur.
Aha. Dünya Valuta Fondu. International Monetary Fund. That's right, yes.
Yəni bildiyim qədər bunlar yəni ki, ya bu fond səhv etmirəmsə, yəni necə deyim, currency-ni yəni valyutanı regulasiya etmək üçündür də, yəni bir dövlətdən bir dövlətə, yəni hansı bir dövlətdə belə deyək də, daha çox necə deyim sizə, yəni nə düşünürəm, bəlkə də mən səhv bilirəm.
Yeah, okay, so firstly, this is International Monetary Fund. The main role of this IMF, by the way, firstly, it was founded in the year 1944, 1945. So right after the world, it should be 1945, right after the World War II, based on the Bretton Woods Agreement. In the next slides, I will talk about it. So right now, just related to IMF, its main role is to create stability in the financial system in the member country. There are several member countries, including Azerbaijan as well, and this IMF giving some technical support, and also IMF can give loan for the member countries. Main purpose is to create financial stability, to help, and also to let's say to create stability in monetary policy in the countries. So generally, it supports the countries. It supports member countries. So let's just continue.
Let's say it prevents from the financial crisis. Yes.
Financial crisis. Yes, we can also say this. That's right. It prevents. It tries to prevent the member countries from financial crisis. However, we observed crisis in some European countries, for example, Greece, in the year 2009. But this is also a member of IMF, but that was recession in that country. So what happened in this case? IMF, supported IMF and G20 countries. Do you know the G20 countries? 19 countries plus European Union, they are the member of that. They create G20. So these countries and IMF, the organization, supported Greece by giving loans, by giving technical supports, etc., in order to overcome this problem, this recession in Greece. But still, the Greece does not have stable economy. So that was right, Ilham. We will also talk about it in this lesson. So what is the Bretton Woods? I said it was created based on Bretton Woods Agreement. The Bretton Woods Agreement is the landmark system. What is landmark? Just like a turning point system for monetary and exchange rate management. And it was so in 1994. This agreement was made in the year 1944. So you know that this is the end of almost the end of World War II, right? And it was developed at the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference held in Bretton Woods. This is the name of the place, Bretton Woods, in the New Hampshire in United States in the year 1944. It was so the designers of this conference, that was a conference called as Bretton Woods Conference, and the agreement also called as Bretton Woods Agreement. The designers of this conference were Keynes, John Maynard Keynes. You have heard his name, right? British economist John Maynard Keynes, and Harry Dexter White from the United States. That's an important history of economy. So let's have a look at next slide, and you will see more information about it. Delegates from 44 countries met to create a new international monetary policy. As I said, that was the end of World War II, and almost all of the countries needed some support, technical support, financial support, and also they need support on creating new mechanism. So that's why this conference was designed, and 44 countries met to create a new international monetary system. Delegates from those countries, representatives. The main goal of the meeting, that meeting of the 730 delegates were to ensure a foreign exchange rate system. So to ensure a foreign exchange rate system to prevent competitive devaluations, in different countries, in the member countries, and promote economic growth in the countries. These are also objects or goals of the of IMF. So to prevent devaluations, competitive devaluations, to promote economic growth in the member countries, and also to ensure a foreign exchange rate system to sustain stability in their economic system, and etc. So preparation for that conference took 2 years. That's quite important. That's why I'm talking about it. The primary designers, as I said, John Maynard Keynes. Who is John Maynard Keynes? You have heard the theory called as Keynesian theory, right? Keynesian theory. What is Keynesian theory? By John Maynard Keynes, British economist. This is about monetary policy, and it was about full employment in the countries, about successful, let's say, monetary policy, how to manage, how to regulate it. Okay, so that's why the Maynard Keynes had an important role in economics. So, and also here Dexter White, he was the chief international economist of the United States Treasury Department. This is like financial department in the country. After this, they had a plan. Each economist, Keynes and here Dexter White, had a plan regarding to creating that. Firstly, designing Bretton Woods Agreement and create International Monetary Fund related to its objectives, etc. Keynes' plan was to establish a global central bank called the Clearing Union. So it was his plan, but actually he didn't create that Clearing Union. So as you see, it is called as a global central bank. So clearing union, what does it mean, clearing? Actually, clearing, it means, in Azerbaijani, it means resmileştirmek, clearing, to make the procedures easier, and also, but at the same time, to create security in the procedures, financial procedures, in that union, which was called as the bank. So he planned to create a global central bank. So that bank would support regarding to the financial systems and about the monetary policy, fiscal policy for the member countries. And White's plan, Dexter White plan, limited the powers and resources of each country. Limited, what does it mean to limit the power and resources of each country? So this is like about just centralization. According to White's plan, to create an organization like IMF, and this is like a central authority. It gives loans to the member countries and also technical supports. At the same time, it says that it limits powers and resources of each country. That there was actually in some aspects these plans so were similar. What happened after that? The creation of International Monetary Fund. It was created to monitor exchange rates and lend reserve currencies to nations. So they found this, in the end they created and they adopted the plan, took ideals from both in the previous, I was talking about their plans, Keynes' plan and White's plan. So they took ideals from both but leaning more toward White's plan. So it was the general creation of IMF was similar to Harry Dexter White's plan. Okay, now let's continue. The IMF was created to monitor exchange rates and lend reserve currencies to nations. This is the main objective of IMF. So please just keep in your mind, this is an important point about the role of IMF. It was created to monitor exchange rates and to lend reserve currencies to nations. These are the main roles of IMF. Azerbaijan also received several loans from IMF, but not recently, but in the beginning of independence in the year 90s. In 90s, Azerbaijan received several loans from IMF. Currently, in last years, Azerbaijan only receives some technical supports, but not monetary supports. After this, it was formally introduced in December. Okay, it was introduced in December. It was started to the general planning process started 1 year earlier, 1944. In 1945, it was introduced when 29 members signed the Articles of Agreement. Okay. And about the goals, more information about the goals of IMF, International Monetary. This is only one of the economical organizations. There are too many economical organizations. One of them is IMF, and also there are, for example, World Bank, and some other economical organizations. Azerbaijan is also one member of World Bank. The World Bank itself is a part of World Bank Group. After this, can you give an example related to economical organizations? Any example? Do you know an example? I mean, the name of some economical organizations. So those economical organizations, they are helping to member countries, just similar to IMF, including technical supports, financial supports, but this is credit. It has percentage, and also about creating stability in their exchange rate systems. The main role is this, actually, for all of those economical organizations. Okay, the goals of this IMF: to ensure stability in the international monetary system, to promote international monetary cooperation and exchange rate stability. After this, to facilitate the balanced growth of international trade. This is also important, to facilitate, to make easier. It means to make easier the balanced growth of international trade. After this, provide resources to help members in balance of payment. What is balance of payment? Do you remember, guys? We talked about balance of payment, right? And what are the problems in balance of payment? If it is not balanced, what happens in this case? Balance of payment, I think you remember this. Ilham, do you remember? Because you answered the question related to this in our lecture at the university. Do you remember what is balance of payment?
Yes, at the end of each year, we calculate all payments and we go through all financial statements and we check if there is any surplus or not, how to make not to have surplus in the next year,
Yeah.
to make task for the next year.
That's right, deficit or surplus. It can create deficit or surplus. The payment into the country and out of a country, it can create deficit or surplus. So the difference between them, we are talking about the difference between the payment into a country and out of a country. So based on that, maybe it will create deficit, or so the difficulty says this is deficit. To provide resources to help members in balance of payment difficulties, this is related to deficit in budget, or to assist with poverty reduction. At the same time, to assist for poverty reduction, there are some other economic organizations, especially dealing with and helping for the countries, member countries, for poverty reduction. So IMF also giving some supports regarding to this. And then Bretton Woods Agreement also created the World Bank Group to set up to provide financial assistance for countries during the reconstruction post-World War phase. So you know the results of World War. Some countries some cities were completely destroyed. So that's why in Europe, as a result of the World War II, that's why one of the main reason of creating World Bank actually was this. In the beginning, World Bank started giving some loans to the European countries for constructing those cities because they were destroyed. After this and end of Bretton Woods Agreement, it was ended. So this will be interesting for you. End of Bretton Woods Agreement. The Bretton Woods Agreement was dissolved between 1968 and 1973. Between this year, it was dissolved. It was ended. An overvaluation of the United States dollar. This is the reason of this overvaluation. What does overvaluation mean? This is like opposite side of inflation, right? Inflation, what is inflation? Currency, decrease in the value of currency. Overvaluation, this is opposite side of this. Value of currency increase, but actually it creates other problems. Overvaluation itself also a problem, and overvaluation because you know it also leads to unemployment. So overvaluation of the United States dollar led to concerns over the exchange rates and tie to the price of gold. Okay, first of all, related to this tied of the price of gold, it is called as gold standard. There was a standard, but currently it does not existed. Gold standard, it was used in the countries, for example, in the United States, in Britain, and some other European countries, but currently it is not. It's not used. So what is gold standard? It was about, let's say, balance the currency, value of currency, based on the price of gold. So based on the price of gold, countries, for example, United States, they were determining their currency. But price of gold was accepted like fixed, but they were, let's say, adjusting their currency to the price of gold. But it creates, this is called as gold standard, but it also creates different problems. Gold itself, this is as you know, it's a natural resource, and it is limited actually, right? Supply of gold sometimes can increase or decrease, and it is amount of gold. As I said, this is not stable. That's why it affects, it affects the value of currency, for example, dollar. And in fluctuation, it creates fluctuation in the value of currency, for example, in dollar. So that's why sometimes it creates overvaluation or inflation. In those years, in the year of 1970s, an overvaluation of the United States dollar led to concerns over the exchange rates and tied to the price of gold. President Richard Nixon in those years called for a temporary suspension. What is suspension? This is like temporarily stopping it, right? Temporary suspension of the dollar's convertibility to gold. So President Richard Nixon made this decision, and after this, actually, it was not, temporary. Because after this, until today, none of the countries are using that gold standard again. So end of Bretton Woods Agreement. Countries were then free to choose any exchange agreement and accept the price of gold. But they do not use price of gold standard. But after this, after those years, countries were free to choose any exchange agreement. So exchange agreement can be different. For example, floating currency, floating exchange rate. You have heard this, right? Floating currency. For example, we are not using floating currency, but some neighbor countries in Russia, right, in Turkey, they are using floating currency. This is not a stable currency. This is changing. So in the year 1973, foreign governments let currencies float in the United States and in different countries, which put an end to the Bretton Woods Agreement, Bretton Woods system. But Bretton Woods system actually, in the beginning, when it was founded, it was not planned to use floating currency in the member countries. But after the year 1973, so foreign governments let currencies float, their currencies float, because it brings some advantages. And so if you remember, we talked about to keep the currency level stable. What are the problems of keeping currency level stable, currency value stable? It creates problems. So for example, we said that government should spend lots of money in order to keep its currency stable. And it creates huge expenses. That's why this is not beneficial for government. Some governments are using floating currencies currently, starting from this year, 1973. So regarding to Bretton Woods Agreement, I have also added link here to get more information, and also you can get more information related to Bretton Woods Agreement and IMF, etc. Of course, from the book, from our course book. I will send the presentation to you after the class, of course. And then important point related to the financial crisis, latest financial crisis. So you remember in the lesson we talked about in our previous lectures, we talked about the financial crisis. And today I also, in the beginning, I just gave some information about financial crisis, recession in Greece. Because this is one of the latest global financial crises in history, happened in Greece. The global crisis in 2008-2009 raised concerns over global liquidity. What is liquidity, by the way? Who can just briefly explain liquidity? What does it mean, liquidity? In Azerbaijan, it is also called like this, liquidity. Any opinion?
I think it's ya belə deyək də, bir pulun ödəmə, necə deyimsə, qabiliyyəti kimi bir şeydir də, səhv etmirəmsə.
Ability of currency for what?
For, let's say, for able to pay something. Yəni bir şey ödəmək, yəni belə deyək də, nəsə o pula almaq, necə deyimsə, ya biz o pula nəsə ala bilirsə, yəni ki, o pul bizim üçün liquid sayılır da, belə yəni əsas.
Yes, actually you're right.
So actually, if we have assets or equipment, like the assets, we can convert it to the money or cash, and we can pay other loans or debts like this. If we can convert these assets to cash, then it's a liquidity.
That's the liquidity. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Convertibility of assets, different assets, convertibility of different assets to cash. This is liquidity. Liquidity of that asset, and also liquidity of in Azerbaijan the qiymətli kağızlar, right? Assets also includes qiymətli kağızlar, right? Yes. So that was right. And then, so we said that the global crisis in 2008-2009 raised concerns over global liquidity and prompted the G20. It was prompted G20 to inject. It's like it forced G20 countries. These are the countries, creates 19 countries, European countries plus European Union, called as G20. By the way, Turkey also is part of G20, but Azerbaijan, of course, is not. To inject huge amounts of cash into the IMF in order to solve this problem, this global liquidity problem, and also to support the countries in the recession. Greece's 2009-2011 financial crisis required assistance from the IMF and the European Union. What was the offer of IMF? Of course, IMF, yes, gave some financial supports. At the same time, IMF required Greece to adopt very unpopular austerity measures. Austerity measures, this is like a official action by a government to reduce the amount of money it spends. It's about reducing the money that is spent by the government. That's why it's unpopular austerity measures. So IMF just offered to the Greece because still they have this country, Greece, has not created stability in its economy. So G20, European Union, IMF, and some other countries, European countries, economic organizations, they are trying to support Greece in order to overcome this this problem, crisis in Greece. Yes. Then regarding to euro, about euro, so what we are going to talk about it, we should explain the European monetary system, and how the euro become the currency of the eurozone. I think you remember this. You can remember this, right? In our lesson, we talked about birth of euro. Maybe you remember that year, birth of euro, and then countries, they started using it. But excluding some countries, they have their own currency. That's why they are not included in the Economic and Monetary Union. We talked about the Economic and Monetary Union. We said that 11 countries, firstly, in the beginning of 90s, 11 European countries, they created the Economic and Monetary Union. So as we say, this is called as monetary union. That's why there is a common currency, euro, those countries, member countries, they are using the same currency. There are some criteria in order to be part of this economic and monetary union. Some countries, still are using their own currency. This is one of the criteria. That's why they are not included in. For example, we said Norway is one of them. Great Britain, England. England actually is not a part of the European Union anymore. But in former times, England, had its own currency as well. And also for Sweden itself has its own currency, and Poland, etc. That's why they are not the member. Let's have a look at next slide. The euro. So the European Monetary System, shortly EMS, it was created, in the year 1979. The countries made a decision. Some European countries made a decision to create European monetary system. They created, it was established to create exchange rate stability within the European community. But in those years, actually, European Union was not existed. But its predecessor of this European Union was existed. Its name was different, so the European Union countries agreed to political and monetary union with the treaty. So about the Treaty of Maastricht in 1992. In the year 1992, the Treaty of Maastricht in the Netherlands was signed by some European countries, and so after this, do you remember the, let's say, creation of euro? We call it as birth of euro. Do you remember that year, guys? We talked about it.
Birth of euro.
1999, birth of euro. I have added the notes. You will see that. We said that this is 1999. This is the birth of euro. But before that, it wasn't accepted to use the same currency, that common currency in the countries. Only after 1999, euro was founded, just like as a common currency. And after this, in the next years, 2002, the currencies of the national currencies and also and euro were coexist. Both of them are used. In the year 2003, national currencies are abandoned, especially in the member countries, in the member of this European and Economic Union. And after this, so you can see on this slide, Sweden, Denmark opted not to adopt the euro, but in future it is planned. So they are planning to adopt euro. Sweden, Denmark, and also some other European countries. Related to European Central Bank, we have also talked briefly about the European Central Bank. It sets monetary policy for the adopters of the euro. Adopters of the euro, these are the member countries of the Economic and Monetary Union. So if you remember, we have talked about some advantages and disadvantages of having this authority, central authority called as European Central Bank. It regulates monetary policy in the member countries, but the member countries still, they are regulating their fiscal policy currently, but not 100%. Let's say just it's like 50%. They are able to to regulate their fiscal policy, and monetary policy, is absolutely regulated by the European Central Bank. As I said, it creates some advantages and disadvantages. In our next lesson, we will discuss about the advantages and disadvantages, because so today we will have 1 more hour of lesson. So it will be, you are going to have this type of questions in next quizzes, and also in your final exam. That's why it's important. Together we will discuss about it. Okay, so currently this is enough for the first hour. If you have any question, you can ask me right now.